and weather with meteorologist Melissa Bombach.
A still unknown enemy of America orchestrates terrorist attacks that destroy the World Trade Center and cripple the Pentagon. Good evening, I'm Andrew Findlay, and this is News 18 at 10 for Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. In New York and Washington, D.C., rescue workers are searching tonight for any survivors of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And as that goes on, so does the search for those responsible for the attacks. ABC's John Berman has the latest.
September 11th will be known as the day that the face of America changed forever. But with the Pentagon still burning, President Bush told the world that the spirit of America will not be shaken.
These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve.
The president, who had a whirlwind day that took him to secured sites in Louisiana and Nebraska, made clear that the U.S. is committed to finding anyone involved in any way to these attacks.
I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
The nightmare began just before 9 a.m. American Flight 11, a Boeing 767 from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into one of the twin towers of the World Trade Center. Then, 10 minutes later, the second plane, a United flight also from Boston to Los Angeles, crashed into the second tower. The twin towers, a symbol of American economic power, stood wounded in the morning sky. Then, they stood no more.
A huge explosion now raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
Just after 10 o'clock, as thousands of terrified people watched from the streets, the South Tower collapsed. 20 minutes later, the second tower came down.
Oh my God, there it goes!
All of a sudden I heard rumbling and we all started running away from it. The glass blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for 20 seconds.
As New York was struck by tragedy, so too was the nation's capital. Another plane crashed into the Pentagon. Later, part of the building collapsed. And in western Pennsylvania, a fourth plane, a United Airlines flight from Newark to San Francisco, went down in a field. The flights were all hijacked. Officials say they were taken by people wielding knives. Several passengers on these flights were able to place cell phone calls to authorities and loved ones, describing the situation before they went down. The casualties from the disaster are not yet known, but they are believed to be in the thousands. Many firefighters and police who rushed to the World Trade Center after the first crash are missing. Rescue officials have begun to receive calls from people still alive, trapped in the rubble. New York's mayor, Rudy Giuliani, has closed Lower Manhattan tomorrow to give the rescue effort the space it needs. The rest of the city will remain open, but the mayor has asked people to stay home if they can. It will be some time before this city, called the capital of the world, returns to normal or anything close. John Berman, ABC News, New York.
Dothan Regional Airport officials say there's nothing to rumors that 4 people flew in on a private aircraft Monday afternoon and asked for information about government buildings. Airport manager Art Morris says a U.S. national and 3 foreigners flew in yesterday at 1 p.m., rented a car, and asked for a map that included the Montgomery area. Morris says airport security notified local law enforcement agencies. The rental car has been returned, says Morris, and has been rented out again, so there's no need to be on the lookout for the vehicle. Morris says the 4 flew out of Dothan at 7 p.m. Monday. Morris says the rental car did not have enough miles on it to have been driven to Montgomery. In Mobile, FBI Special Agent in Charge Chuck Middleton says they will be tracking down everything that comes in.
Well, I can't comment publicly on any investigations that are ongoing related to today's tragedy. Of course, we're responsible here in Mobile for the lower 36 counties of Alabama. But with that said, we will be in a position to respond to any leads coming out of New York or Washington, D.C. that might impact this part of the country, or if we can provide any assistance to that investigation, we'll be doing that.
So basically, your agents are tracking down any leads that come in locally related to this?
Right.
Have you had any other calls from any other cities here in South Alabama or anywhere in the area of any similar incidents?
None, no.
Middleton says there have been no other calls of similar incidents here in South Alabama. Like other military bases across America, Fort Rucker went on security alert today. Army officials closed 2 gates going into the base and restricted entry at all other gates as the base went to threat condition Delta, the highest level of alert. News 18's Matt Barentine has more.
Over the past few weeks, Fort Rucker has trained for terrorism. And Tuesday morning, the Post had to put this training into use.
We're at ThreatCon Delta. That's the highest level of security measures that we can go to on post. I can't get into some of the measures that entails, I think for obvious reasons.
Gates were closed and checkpoints were set up. Cars were moved from the command building and it was roped off. All these precautions have been trained for due to the threat of terrorism.
Experts have been saying for a long time that it wasn't if, but when something like this would happen. And it's a tragedy. It's just tragic, everything that's happening.
And now this tragedy has happened. Fort Rucker is taking every precaution not to be the next target.
Matt Barentine reporting. With so many military personnel and retirees in and around Fort Rucker, emotions are running high as the Army base is on threat condition Delta. Today, we asked some Daleville residents for their thoughts on the terrorist tragedy.
I really think it's stupid how, somebody just wants to attack the U.S. just because the way we're running our country.
It's scary, you know what I'm saying? So everybody hear about all the lives getting lost and all that stuff, man, but it don't make no sense. It don't make no sense.
Okay, what's your name, sir?
Leave that.
Dothan residents, like others around the world, watched in horror as the World Trade Center crumbled and the Pentagon buckled. We asked some people locally here in Dothan what they thought about this tragedy that's sending shockwaves to the tri-states and beyond.
I just think it's a sad thing that has happened in our country. When we live in a country like this, as strong as our country should be, for something like that to happen.
I'm just praying that they definitively find out who did this, and I hope that there's strong retaliatory action taken.
In fact, I was watching television when one of the planes hit the other building, and of course my reaction was sadness and a deep feeling for those people, because I know that many of them died.
Rumors that gas prices will skyrocket after the attack are driving motorists to the pumps to fill up. There's been word that the price of a gallon of unleaded could go up to $4 or $5. Lines were long at many local gas stations, and motorists say they're getting a tank full just in case.
Told me that somebody told her that in Enterprise the gas prices went up to $4 a gallon, which I thought was just rumor, but I figured I'd stop and get gas anyway, being I was about empty. And obviously it's a good thing I am here.
No, I hadn't heard where they was going up or not. They talk about a war. But if we get the gas, what we're going to do with it, this war.
Well, basically, we just had to come out to get some gas, and I decided I'd just wait and come on here. And when I got home, I heard that the gas was probably going to jump up $4 or $5, so I decided I'd better come on.
Alabama Governor Don Siegelman has issued a statement saying, quote, there is no reason for gasoline prices to rise, end quote. He also says, quote, I am prepared to take any necessary steps in order to remedy this unfortunate trend. Gas company officials say prices at the pump should stabilize after the panic subsides. Coming up, a student is arrested for making a bomb threat to Mariana High School today. And today's terrorist attack has Americans rolling up their sleeves. We'll tell you why when News 18 at 10 continues.
Internet services are provided by Graceba Snow Hill Internet.
Join News 18 at 5 and 10 p.m. today for the Golden Apple Award winner, brought to you by Sylvan Learning Center.
When I had to read out loud, I didn't know lots of the words. Like, I had trouble with island, so I had to sound it out. Is land. And I know I sounded dumb.
At Sylvan Learning Center, we guarantee your child's reading skills will improve 1 full grade level in only 5 months.
Now, I know all the words, and I can just read it straight through, no problem.
If your child needs help with reading, call Sylvan at 1-800-EDUCATE. Success is learned.
Hi, I'm Skip Gober, General Manager of Bill Kramer Chevrolet in Donaldsonville, Georgia.
Now's the time to buy with rebates up to $3,000 in select 2001 S10 pickups and Blazers. Interest rates as low as 0.0% on 2001 Chevrolet Malibus, Pontiac Sunfires, Grand Ams, Grand Prix, and Firebirds. 2001 Tahoes and Suburbans, savings up to $5,000. Dealer retains all rebates and incentives.
Take the short drive away from high prices to Bill Kramer Chevrolet in Donaldsonville, Georgia, where we always discount trucks.
An accident or illness can strike any time of the day or night. And when they do, every second counts. Our emergency department is open 24/7. We are staffed around the clock with physicians and nurses who are trained to handle any kind of emergency. Emergency health care. We do it well. Southeast Alabama Medical Center in Dothan. Whatever you do it well.
I thought my numbers were impressive. Our economical ambassador paint service is only $189. Mako is good, fast, and a great value. It's Mako for makeovers. Call 1-888-MAKO-USA.
Now, back to WDHN News 18 at 10 with Andrew Findley.
Alabama's congressional delegation is condemning today's terrorist attack. Senator Richard Shelby, the ranking Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee, calls it a war without boundaries. His colleague, Senator Jeff Sessions, opened up his office space to New York Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, whose office is next door. Her staff was trying to respond to the overwhelming needs of New York City. Congressman Terry Everett of Enterprise sent his staff home this morning, but he stayed in his Washington office because he didn't want to, quote, let cowards close down our government. Alabama Governor Don Siegelman says state government will not be frozen by the terrorist attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C. The governor arrived back in Montgomery late this afternoon after an aborted trip to Washington. Siegelman's plane had to land in South Carolina after Washington area airports were shut down by the attacks. Siegelman says South Carolina state troopers drove him about halfway back to Montgomery, and Alabama troopers brought him the rest of the way. The governor says he ordered state offices and the Alabama Capitol to remain open today so as not to give in to the terrorists. Troy State University political science professor Dr. Richard Martin says the main thing for people, and especially government, to concentrate on is gathering all the information possible to determine who is responsible for this hideous terrorist action. Whoever is responsible, whether it's a group of terrorist individuals or the organized effort of a foreign country, will determine how our country retaliates. Dr. Martin says many are asking at this point, are we at war?
The terrorist mentality is a constant state of war. Now, if the United States is dealing with a country, the repercussions of the concept of war are significantly different from dealing with a group of individuals, with terrorists. If we're dealing with terrorist organizations, then a reaction is no more than a security reaction, not carrying the same consequences as a formal definition war action, whereas an action against a state might involve a different definition of whether or not there is a state of war.
Martin says another concern for the country is that as the shock wears off, American citizens may act out or retaliate in their own forms of terrorism or violence against those of different ethnicities or religions that they connect to this act of violence. Contrary to earlier reports, Farley Nuclear Plant in eastern Houston County is not closed tonight. Southern Company spokesman Rick Kimball says they have tightened security at the power plant and are not allowing visitors on the site until further notice. However, Kimball says all Farley employees should report to work. Kimball says both units at Farley are operating at 100%. Across the country, Americans are rolling up their sleeves in a response to the attack. The American Red Cross chapter on Montezuma Street here in Dothan is taking blood donations to help the scores of victims of today's tragedy. Red Cross officials here in Dothan say response so far has been overwhelming.
I have two sons in the military, and we were watching this disaster on television this morning when they called in the New York City area for people to give blood. And I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and I feel very connected. And this is a very serious tragedy to our country.
Dothan's Red Cross chapter is extending its hours so more blood donors can go by and give the gift of life. Houston County emergency management officials went to work after getting a call from the state to be on alert. EMA Director Shelby Womack says they'll be on alert until further notice. Representatives from the National Guard, the Sheriff's Department, police, and fire departments are standing by in the center if they're needed.
And we have terrorism plans in place. You know, of course, you have to react to these. You have no idea that they're going to happen. And the plans are there. They're in place. We have, of course, Fort Rucker nearby, and we have the nuclear plant nearby, and not that far from the Capitol in Montgomery. And a lot of things that could be involved.
News 18 Chief Meteorologist Melissa Bombach joins us now with a look at our weather forecast and some showers move through this afternoon.
Yes, we saw about a quarter of an inch of rain here at the station, and we saw lots of rain across the tri-states, all of your entire forecast in just a moment. First, let's take a look at our Color Our Weather World's winner for tonight. Her name is Cheryl Ward. Congratulations, and I'll be right back with your forecast.
This Fort Rucker Minute brought to you by Solomon Chevrolet and Army Aviation Federal Credit Union.
Pride, such an intangible emotion. Army Aviation Center Federal Credit Union, proudly serving the military and civilian communities in Southeast Alabama for over 35 years. Now, finally, there's a credit union for everyone who lives, works, worships, or attends school in Walton County, Florida. Army Aviation Center Federal Credit Union is Walton County's credit union. Visit our newest branch and ATM on Emerald Coast Parkway in Miramar Plaza, serving Southeast Alabama, Florida's Emerald Coast, and the Mobile Bay Area. Army Aviation Center Federal Credit Union, federally insured, NCUA.
The Fort Rucker Report with Matt Barentine.
The Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Department at Fort Rucker offers a lot of services to the soldiers on post. But perhaps the best service they offer is the Leisure Travel Office at the Soldier Service Center. This office gives Fort Rucker personnel thousands of choices when it comes to travel. They help to hunt down military discounts and make reservations at popular destinations. They also offer group tours, and the most popular of these tours are bus rides from Fort Rucker to Atlanta to see the theater or go to a Braves game. The most popular destinations for a traveling family are the parks of Central Florida and the sugar white sands of the Panhandle beaches. Wherever you want to go, if you work on post, the Leisure Travel Office can make sure that your vacation is a great experience. This has been Matt Barentine for the Fort Rucker Report, only on WDHN News 18.
Buy or lease. You can't beat the deals during the final 2001 sell-down at Solomon Chevrolet Cadillac. New 2001 Suburban LS, $29,994 or only $379 a month. New 2002 Trailblazer, $25,697 or only $339 a month. Plus, join the Solomon Chevrolet WKMX Sing-Along Contest. You could win.
Remember, we don't want all the business, just yours.
Solomon Chevrolet Cadillac in Dothan. Now, WDHN News 18 weather with meteorologist Melissa Bombach.
Welcome back. Well, some of us did see some rain this evening. We saw a quarter of an inch of rain at the station, and lots of heavy rainfall fell all across the tri-states. Currently, though, we are seeing partly cloudy skies and very humid conditions with a dew point of 71 degrees. The temperature is currently at 73 degrees, and the winds are still pretty high out of the east at about 6 miles per hour. Now, our almanac says that our high was 89 in Dothan today. It was 72 for our low this morning. So we're a little bit above average, right around average for our high temperatures, and a little bit above average for our low temperatures for this time of year. A very chilly day back in 1956, a low temperature of 53 degrees. Here's a look at our local Doppler radar. Lots of showers still fall to our north from Montgomery over towards Columbus, down towards Eufaula, and in the central portions of Georgia at the current time. In the southern portions of the viewing area, central and southern portions of the viewing area, we are seeing partly cloudy skies. Now, we are going to continue to see showers and thunderstorms in the overnight hours, mainly on a line Abbeville northward and over towards Crenshaw and Pike counties tonight. And so we're going to continue to see those scattered showers in the northern portions of the viewing area. Taking a look at the state-level radar, we're seeing showers and thunderstorms from Birmingham southward towards Montgomery and down into our viewing area. Most of the showers in Florida have subsided at the current hour. As we take a look at the nation, we are seeing clear weather all across the central portion of the United States and the northeast as well along the mid-Atlantic. We're seeing mostly clear skies also because high pressure is in control of the weather. Now, just a few spotty showers still exist in Alabama over towards Georgia. We do have another tropical depression that is brewing in the Gulf of Mexico. This is tropical depression number 8, and it is projected to move over Florida and move out into the Atlantic. But one model does bring it back to the panhandle of Florida, so we'll keep a close eye on that for you if it does develop. But it looks like the high pressure to our north will keep it to our south, and it should move on over the Florida Peninsula. Here's a look at what's happening right now. High pressure is to our north, low pressure is to our south. We are seeing a very strong river of airflow between these two pressure systems. That's going to make our winds increase tomorrow to around 10 to 15 miles per hour. We're going to continue to see this low pressure inch closer and closer to the Tampa area and possibly move over the peninsula of Florida and out into the Atlantic. We're going to keep a close eye on it for you, though, as it does come closer. This is Hurricane Aaron. We do have Tropical Storm Felix still in the Atlantic Ocean. It does not look like it's going to affect the United States, but we'll keep a close eye on that for you. And this is the satellite image of Tropical Depression number 8, which we are concerned with. Here's a look at Tropical Depression number 8's position. It's at 25.4 north, 84.6 west, and the movement is towards the west-southwest at 5 miles per hour, but it is supposed to go over the central portions of Florida. If you're tracking Tropical Storm Felix, here are his coordinates. For tonight for us, expect some showers to continue across the tri-states with partly cloudy skies. Now, tomorrow the winds are going to pick up. We have a 40% chance of showers and thunderstorms in the forecast, but look at the extended forecast. Dry, cool air will be across the area Friday through Sunday. Looks like a great weekend forecast for us with lows in the mid-60s, and our highs will be in the mid to upper 80s for the weekend, but we do have to go through one more chance for rain on our Thursday, 40% chance, and then it should dry out by Friday.
All right, we'll be looking for some cooler, drier weather.
Yes.
Thanks, Melissa. Amid all the chaos caused by the terrorist attacks, Jackson County, Florida Sheriff's deputies arrested a Marietta High School football player today for allegedly calling in a bomb threat to the school. Deputies arrested 18-year-old Tyler Porter of Chipley, who you see as number 14 in white in this library video. Lieutenant Michael Daniels with the Jackson County Sheriff's Office says Porter is charged with calling Marietta High School just after noon and saying a bomb would explode in 2 hours. Daniels says this is the 5th call in a series of similar bomb threats to the school this year. Porter is in the Jackson County Correctional Facility tonight and is scheduled to make his first court appearance tomorrow morning. Kim Allen joins us now with sports, and a lot of some local and a lot of national sporting events were just called off today because of the tragedy.
Yeah, all national events off the board, but plenty of high school volleyball matches this evening, and we'll have highlights from Dothan and Northview when we return. Stay with us.
This weather segment brought to you by Jones Baird Chevy Olds, the lowest sales tax rate in the Wiregrass.
At Jones Baird Chevrolet Olds in Geneva, we have a large selection of trucks. Jones Baird is your small town, big volume dealer. If you're looking for a pre-owned car or truck, we have several to choose from. Jones Baird has the lowest sales tax rate in the Wiregrass. So if you're looking for clean, pre-owned transportation or the truck, Jones Baird in Geneva is the place. Come see one of our friendly sales staff at Jones Baird. We're large enough to serve you and small enough to care.
To a kid, this is a good deal. But you've grown up. You expect more. And you get it with Arby's 5 for $5.95 mix and match deal. Any combination of 5 roast beefs and beef and cheddars for the special limited time only price. 3 and 2, 4 and 1, your choice. You don't want to miss this. The 5 for $5.95 mix and match deal, only at Arby's. Satisfy your grown-up taste.
Who else but crazy men would film their crimes?
2 visitors are about to bring America.
I want to know who these guys are, and I want to know now.
To its knees.
They had a video camera, and I just wanted them to get out of here.
In prime time. Now,
If it bleeds, it leads.
2 of New York's finest.
It's going down! Go!
Must stop the madness.
Will of the hunt.
Robert De Niro, Edward Burns.
You want headlines? You want to be a celebrity? Shoot me!
15 minutes. Rated R.
Now, big
savings on big SUVs like Expedition and Excursion. During Ford's authorized clearance, you can save up to $12,000 with low 1.9 financing for 5 full years. But hurry, these deals and these SUVs are going fast. It's Ford's authorized clearance. See your neighborhood Ford dealer today.
Now, WDHN News 18 Sports with Kim Allen.
Welcome back. Amidst today's national tragedy, all major sporting events were canceled. But at the high school level, a full slate of area volleyball matches hit the court. That included an early season showdown between city rivals Dothan and Northview. Head out to Northview High School this evening, and Christy Andrews for the Lady Tigers would take her team on a run from 6-2. She would put together a number of unreturnable serves, and the Lady Tigers ran it out to an 11-2 advantage with Andrews at the helm. But the Lady Cougars look to stay in it. Shelby Markham gets set up and puts it away. Northview hanging tough. It was not to be. Kendra Daniels on serve for game point. Northview lines up wrong. Game 1 goes to Dothan 15-3, and they would take game 2 as well, 16-4. The Auburn men's basketball team has lost its point guard for now. Senior guard Lincoln Glass has been suspended from the team indefinitely for academic reasons. The South Bend, Indiana native played in all 32 games last year, starting 7. He averaged nearly 8 points and 3 assists per game as a junior. Tigers head coach Cliff Ellis says, quote, Lincoln is still a part of this basketball team and will have an opportunity to rejoin the team at the appropriate time. Academics will always be the first priority with our basketball team. Auburn begins practice on October 13th before beginning the season with an exhibition game on November 1st. With Glass out for now, Marquise Daniels may run the point with help from some of the Tigers' incoming freshmen and junior college transfers. As we told you at 5 o'clock, there were a number of cancellations this afternoon and evening, and there are more to come. NASCAR has shut down qualifying for Sunday's race in Loudon, New Hampshire. The field will be set according to the Winston Cup point standings. And there's still no word on whether college and pro football will go on as scheduled this weekend. However, the ACC has made its decision on this week's Thursday night action. Both Penn State at Virginia and NC State hosting Ohio have been postponed. Some other big games from the weekend. Miami hosting Washington has been postponed for now. They'll play at the end of November. Ohio State at home with San Diego State has been wiped out. Any game where there's a long travel period for a team, looks like they will shut that down.
Thanks, Ken. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
Blue Cross Blue Shield is ahead of most companies in trying to help the physicians provide better care. Patients can't remember which tests were done through the Unfold Solutions program. That information is available online, so that means that I can make a better decision as far as the quality of care that I can give that patient.
Blue Cross Blue Shield, they're being good citizens to meet the needs of the patients and the industry.
When they see the need, they respond.
It's Ray Hall Smith Toyota 2001 National Clearance Event, and you'll like it. Your choice, brand new 2001 Toyota Tacoma or a brand new 2001 Toyota Corolla for only $12,990. Your choice, a brand new 2001 Toyota Tundra or a brand new Camry for only $15,990. Or your choice, a brand new Toyota Sienna or a brand new Toyota 4Runner for only $24,990. Great values, wide selection, low financing. You'll like it at Ray Hall Smith Toyota on the Circle, Southside, Dothan.
Finally tonight, brought to you by First Bank of Dothan.
Back when Sam and I went into business, you could always borrow money somewhere if you didn't need it. But at the start, money was all we did need. Had rent for that empty storefront, but couldn't swing the equipment. Now, the local bank said they lent money based on character, capability, and credit. I had credit, and we were capable, and Sam was a character.
A heritage of helping small businesses grow. The First Bank of Dothan, member FDIC.
Before we go, let's check in again with Melissa Baum back for tomorrow's forecast.
Yeah, well, we are seeing scattered showers in the northern portions of the viewing area, mainly in Barber, Pike, and northward up towards Montgomery. Now, for tomorrow, we are going to see a mix of sun and clouds with a 40% chance of showers and thunderstorms Highs will be around 90 degrees with winds out of the northeast at 10 to 15.
All right, thanks, Melissa. By the way, Bird Funeral Home here in Dothan will be giving out American flags starting tomorrow morning. They are on West Main Street here in Dothan. Also want to announce some church services. Many churches open their doors this evening to have special services. Some are having some tomorrow. Grandview Baptist Church will have one at noon Wednesday. Covenant United Methodist Church here in Dothan at 6:30 tomorrow evening. And Pondtown United Methodist Church in Hartford also at 6:30 tomorrow evening. Today's terrorist tragedy is like nothing most of us have ever seen in our lives. Some people compare it to the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 that started World War II. Certainly, today's a day that most of us will never forget. As we leave you tonight to return you to ABC News coverage, we ask you to join us in a moment of silence for the victims. Here are some scenes of flags flying at half-mast around Dothan as they are all around America. Good night from all of us at WDHN News 18.
Coming to First United Methodist Church because I get to come together with my friends and celebrate our faith in God.
Wonderful environment and the nice people that are members here.
Get to experience all kind of walks of life and be an influence if you can.
Always something here that is available for you to do.
Is the happy people, the positive environment, and it just feels like a second home to me.
Youth have an important place at First United Methodist Church.
Driving in my car, all I want to do is to thank you, even though I don't know who you are. You let me change lanes, driving in my car, whoever you are. I want to thank you, whoever you are. I want to thank you, whoever you are.
Money doesn't rain down from the sky. The post office delivers it. And what makes it great is when that money's coming from the IRS. Why not use your tax rebate check on something that will last and last? Like carpet and vinyl for your home. Carpet Discount Barn in Dothan has prices so low, you'll be amazed how far your tax rebate will go. Beautiful Berber and plush carpet for your home starting at just $5.99 a square yard. The Carpet Discount Barn has vinyl from $3.99. See your new carpet and vinyl today at the Carpet Discount Barn, Plant Street just off East Main, downtown Dothan.
I thought the numbers I put up were pretty impressive. Now I'm on a team with guys with equally big-time stats, Mako. When you check out our great prices, you'll wonder how we do it. Our economical ambassador paint service is only $189. Mako is good, fast, and a great value. It's Mako for makeovers, the job well done by the #1 player in auto painting and body work. Call 1-888-MAKO-USA.
Tomorrow on News 18 in the morning, Chef Michael will be cooking up a tasty treat, and meteorologist Matt Barentine will have your local weather forecast. Join us.
First National Bank, with locations in Dothan and Ashford. Definitely different defines us.
In every respect. So we'll be back in just a minute.
This is an ABC News special report.
As we said before, the entire day has been a special report on ABC News, and if you've managed to get your hands on the newspaper in various parts of the country today, you know that your local newspaper has devoted a huge amount of attention to this, and not only in the cities where this occurred, but in Pennsylvania where one of the aircraft went down, and in every city and community across the country, how the country was itself involved. We are, those of us who are working in newsrooms and conveying information, are isolated in the same way that you are, and we do our best in the course of this day to get you close to what has happened and help all of us get closer to understanding why this has happened and what the United States intends to do about it. First, in simple terms of responding before the world to the action which is taken against the country today, and what the United States might do if and or when it is able to discover those people who are responsible for this, those individuals, whether members of an organization, and perhaps that state or states, which if you listen to Larry Eagleberger, former senior official at the State Department and in the White House for many years believe should require, and a lot of people in the country will sympathize with this notion, an attack on any government that may have been party to these attacks on the United States today. But I think probably the best thing we can do at the moment in describing this day of warfare, 21st century style, as one historian referred to it today, is to go to Diane Sawyer, who has managed to compile much of what we have seen in New York today. Then we'll go to Washington, and then we'll try to pull it all together for you in the next few minutes and proceed with our coverage from there. So here's Diane.
Look at this moment once again. A colossus, wounded, and next to it, another giant with no shield. We cannot see inside, but thousands of people are fighting fire and fumes and fear, making their way down endless staircases, trying to escape before this.
A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way.
No one knows what's next. People are running for their lives.
And all of a sudden, there was this big explosion. I don't know if it's just like what you just seen. That's what we went through before we came out of the building. Then when we get out the building, then another smoke cloud came. We had to go through that smoke cloud again. Mom, I just want you to know I'm all right. And then we saw the people jumping. We saw what we thought was debris, and we realized it was people jumping. I can't do anymore.
The second tower collapses.
Oh my God, there it goes!
And tonight, where New York's tallest buildings proclaimed America's secular might, a ruin, countless souls crushed beneath. Some of them, we're told, were on the phone, saying farewell to their families as the building burned. Some of them, the firefighters, the police, there not by order, but by spirit.
It's the most tragic thing that has happened to America by far. I've been on the fire department 20 years and never lived through this. I lived through 2 collapses today. I'm on vacation from the fire department. I came in on my own. My car's all wrecked, and I just came in to help people and do my job.
And those who perished in the planes also phoning to warn the world that they were now riding in weapons of war.
We've been attacked. It's like World War II. World War III. It's unbelievable.
Was there no defense for the Pentagon? And what happened aboard the flight that crashed outside Pittsburgh? We've heard a story that the pilot refused to hurl his plane on Washington and crashed in a field instead. Hospitals filled with wounded, strangers volunteering to give blood. In the ashes, rededication by a nation whose symbol is the eagle because it is the bird least afraid of a storm, the bird strong enough to soar through and above it.
As we said, we want to try to get you close to this. And one of the difficulties at the Pentagon has been that ABC's John McWethy, who has an office for ABC News in the Pentagon, was on the other side of the Pentagon complex from where this attack took place this morning. You know, there were 4 aircraft involved. One of them crashed in rural Pennsylvania. But an American Airlines plane, American Flight 11, on which 81 passengers and 11 crew died. This was a flight hijacked by the terrorists as it was originally scheduled to go from Boston to Los Angeles. Then the United Airlines flight 767 with 56 passengers and a crew of 9 on board, which took off from Boston on its way to Los Angeles, was crashed into the other World Trade Center. And then at 9:38, another American 757 crashed into the Pentagon, where 58 passengers and 6 crew on that aircraft died. And one of the important things in terms of looking at the explosions throughout the day we've been made aware of by people paying close attention is that whatever the terrorists used on the particular aircraft to subdue the crew, get into the cockpit, and it is widely believed by people who've analyzed this, but that's all it is at the moment, themselves went to the controls. It's been a conventional piece of wisdom from the very beginning that no American airline captain could or would accept the notion of flying his own aircraft into one of these targets. And while we have no idea at this point, and may never have any idea what happened in the cockpits of those particular aircraft, there has been some suggestion today that there are terrorists out there throughout the world and terrorist organizations who are able to enlist people who have some flying capacity, some flying ability. And John Nance, who is our aviation analyst, and others have pointed out that there were pilots who flew in the Afghan Air Force, or who flew with the Afghans during the struggle between Afghanistan and the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of talent out there in terms of international terrorism in general. But now, as we make our way through the day, we go back to the Pentagon. John McWethy, like everybody else, was obliged to evacuate from the Pentagon. He's on the side of the Pentagon which was attacked and has had a difficult day, but a tough day, John, trying to report this story from this location. So just review for us, would you?
Peter, I was sitting at my desk in the Pentagon when there was a jolt, and it was clear that the Pentagon had been hit just as the two towers of the World Trade Center had been hit. Horrible clouds of black smoke were billowing out of the Defense Department. A sense of disbelief as people were being forced to evacuate the building. In the part where the greatest damage was, there were many terribly injured people who were being helped by their colleagues out to the pavement outside. Hundreds and hundreds of rescue workers were on the scene within hours. Ambulances were lined up. Bodies were also lined up. There was a tremendous sense of the medical people trying to come to aid of those who were injured. But it took more than 5 hours for rescue workers to really get inside the damaged part of the Pentagon. And tonight, Peter, they are continuing the work. They have heavy equipment. They are working under lights. There are special dogs that are trained to look for dead bodies and to look for survivors both, who are working in the rubble tonight to see if they can pull anyone out of the rubble. We know tonight, Peter, that various jurisdictions, New York, for example, has called up more than 2,000 National Guard. By morning, there will be an additional 1,000. This is to help with control of intersections in the streets. In Virginia, more than 300 have been called up, and about the same number in the District of Columbia. For a while, the intersections in the District of Columbia in northern Virginia and in much of New York appeared to be a very tightly controlled area by the military, by the police. There was very little movement of traffic in any of these jurisdictions. The government is going to great lengths. The president tonight saying that the government is going to be open for business tomorrow. But of course, much of the country today was utterly paralyzed from one coast to the other because of the airline cancellations, because of the cell phone tie-ups, and because of so much else that has happened during the course of this day, Peter.
And John, just before we leave you for just a little while, would you review for us what your sources believe the casualty estimates are at this moment?
There is no estimate for what has happened in New York that I know of, although they fear the casualties there are going to be many, many thousands. We are hearing from one local official here, Peter, that there could be as many as 800 dead in the Pentagon.
Thanks very much, John McWethy at the Pentagon, as close to the Pentagon as he's allowed to get tonight, reporting under very difficult circumstances. Cynthia McFadden is on the west side of New York City in what we keep describing as the trauma center, where triage was originally meant to occur. Do you have any further sense or any closer sense of the magnitude of this in terms of human loss?
Well, Peter, what I can tell you is this. We have talked to sources who have been inside the triage center all day and asked them why the volume of extreme trauma, why the number of people just hasn't been seen. You can see this parade of ambulances, I think, behind me here. We've been seeing ambulances come through all day and rescue vehicles. All of them, for the most part, empty, with the exception of some rescue workers and some other rescuers at the scene. But by and large, they have been walking into this center, not the kind of severe trauma. When I just asked why they weren't here, someone simply said, Cynthia, it's because the victims are dead.
No, thanks, Cynthia McFadden. I said a short while ago that we'd only actually publicly identified one person, one individual who died today, and that was the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, Barbara Olson. I got her first name right, I think. Barbara Olson, who was on the aircraft that attacked the Pentagon and was able to communicate with her husband, to whom we obviously extend our deepest, just everybody who knows him must be thinking about his tragedy tonight and the impending potential for tragedy for so many other people. But Mayor Giuliani in New York has now given us some sense of loss in the firefighting contingent in New York City, because as you couldn't help but see in an instance like this, when every civilian in his or her right mind was running away from things, the firefighters and the police, but particularly the firefighters, were running in the direction of disaster. And 3 top city fire department officials died at the scene of the World Trade Center devastation today. One of them, Ray Downey, the chief of Special Operations Command, ironically was in charge of the New York City contingent that was sent to Oklahoma City at the time of the bombing. And Chief Downey has lost his life. Also killed tonight from the ranks of the firefighters in New York City were the first deputy commissioner, William Feehan, and the chief of the department, Peter Ganchi. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Just telling us, as we already knew instinctively, that the most senior officers of the fire, of the New York City Department of Firefighting, were on their way in to help people not running away at this time. Bill Blakemore is in lower Manhattan at the moment. Bill?
Peter, we are beginning to see a little bit more movement here of these large operations for search and rescue, which have been staged here during the day. They've been moving down the street past us here. But we had ABC crews come back just in the last few minutes, including correspondent Don Daler, telling us there are still flames coming out of the base of the trade towers. They're pouring water onto it, trying to get the trade towers themselves cooled down enough to move into the very center of it. There are search and rescue operations going on around the edge of the base of the trade towers, but a couple of buildings there are still on fire as well. We have seen some of the heavy equipment beginning to move some of the rubble out. It's just the beginning of a long process that's going to be, beginning to truck a little bit of it out. We have at the same time hundreds of firemen and volunteers and search and rescue workers here at what is nearly midnight in New York, standing by in these darkened streets. It's a very eerie feeling around us because the electricity is out all around this area. There are a few floodlights, but many of the streets completely dark, as everybody waits for it to get even cooler at the center so they can begin the operation, which is really just around the edges at the moment.
Thanks very much, Bill Blakemore, who we will go back to on a regular basis. All our reporters have been on the scene since the beginning, and so have these firefighters. An extraordinary collection of uniforms you've seen today. There's the police department, of course, and the fire department as well. And you'll see from time to time a jacket with ATF on the back of it, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which had an office in the World Trade Center in New York. So these men now working in the search and hopefully rescue operation tonight have no place to work anymore, as do any number of people. 50,000 people, we've said it many times, worked in the Trade Center. And earlier today, we'll try to get it up again, you get some sense of the enormous amount of commerce and business and government business that was done in the trade towers. And said it before, it was just at that moment when people were coming to work or perhaps had not come to work. And that's one of the reasons we're so uncertain about the magnitude of the human tragedy there tonight, because as we have been told by people who managed to get out of the trade tower, that some people got out of the building, of at least the northern building, where the first aircraft hit, from some of the very highest floors close to where the explosion occurred, and many people got out in an orderly fashion from the lower floors. So we have no estimate whatsoever of the number of people who died. And as you all know, it's been an extraordinary day for the president, in part because we've seen the presidency at work in terms of security and the shield that just forms around the President of the United States, keeps the President and the Vice President separate. The leadership in Congress was whisked away to a, quote, secure location, as it turned out, outside Washington. But ABC's Ann Compton was with the President. Before we go to her to hear from her the moments which she and very few other people witnessed today, who at least can talk to us, here's what the President had to say, or in part what the President had to say to the nation. He's talked to the nation a couple times today, but here's what he had to say when he got back to the White House tonight.
America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks.
Excerpts from the President's address, which he and his staff didn't have an enormous amount of time to work on, but seems in large measure to satisfy people all over the nation tonight in terms of what he actually said. What government will do now is the question for tomorrow. And as we said, ABC's Ann Compton was with the President from the beginning of his trip today. She was the full reporter on Air Force One today and had this quite a... You there, Ann?
I am indeed.
This astonishing trip around the country with the President. We left you, I think, and it's worth, I think, perhaps revisiting the video of it, when you arrived in Nebraska and the President was taken into a bunker at what used to be and still is a Strategic Air Command headquarters base.
This is a place, Peter, where they knew the President would be able to teleconference with the Vice President, who was here at the White House. Even though most of the offices were evacuated, he was in a secure place in the Situation Room. But you can see the President getting out of a motorcade, and instead of these great, huge, important buildings at Offutt Air Force Base, the President and a group who was with him, he had a skeleton staff with him, he had a number of members of the military from the air base, and he gets out of a sedan and look at them pile into this small, yellow building. This was the entrance that led to a big underground bunker where the complete teleconferencing setup was ready to go. He used it for about an hour and a half, able to see Dick Cheney, able to see Condoleezza Rice here at the White House while they plotted what to do, what they knew, and the President began to make the beginnings of his address tonight. It was also the time, we were told, when the President said it is right for him to be back in Washington at the end of the day to show Americans that the federal government isn't shut down.
Then you described the fairly lengthy journey back from Nebraska to Washington and the extraordinary sight of fighter aircraft on your left and right wing securing the President's airspace. You know, this was the one flight of the day, Peter, when we knew as we took off where we were going. They said, yes, the President's going back to Washington. We assumed Andrews Air Force Base. And the President's press secretary came back to where just 5 of us were filling up the back rear of the plane. And he said, Ari Fleischer said, come look at this. And as you can see, this is off the left wing of the aircraft. This is where there was an F-16 sitting right off the President's wing. And frankly, it gave great comfort for those of us who we figured the planes were with us most of the day. And on the other wing, 2 F-15s on the side that the President would be able to see from his cabin as he worked on the remarks in his speech. It is so unusual to see that kind of physical security. The same was true when we landed at Andrews, how quickly he went aboard his helicopter. In fact, you and I were on the air at that moment. We had been told, don't say that he's going to helicopter. But, Peter, how dramatic when that chopper came down around the White House South Lawn and the beautiful sunset, golden light, and behind him a huge plume of gray smoke from the still smoldering Pentagon. Press isn't usually allowed to helicopter with him, but they had us on a chopper right behind him. And it was a dramatic scene to show just how intense the effort was to keep the President safe. And this is... for the President, it was also an unusual day. We haven't seen this man tested by fire, and we saw George Bush take the full brunt
of everything today. Peter?
Thanks, Andy. Ann Compton, who's had this extraordinary day with the president, and we want to talk to her again. But we have on the phone now in California, Alice Hoagland. Ms. Hoagland, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
First of all, let me say how very grateful we are that you take the time under such circumstances to call us, or sorry, to talk to us, not to call us, but to talk to us about what you know about today. I should tell you that Mrs. Hoagland, are you Mrs. Hoagland?
Miss Hoagland, I'm
Okay.
the mother of Mark Bingham.
I know you are. The mother of Mark Bingham, who was on United Airlines Flight 93 that crashed in Pennsylvania today. And Ms. Hoagland has agreed to tell us, I think, what your son said to you from the aircraft. Can you tell us from the beginning?
Yes, that's correct. The phone rang about 6:45 this morning, and Carol Phipps, a friend of the family, answered it, and she heard a male voice say, get Kathy or Alice quickly. And she did. She went and got Kathy, who is Mark's aunt. That's my sister-in-law. It's her home here. And I heard Kathy running down the hall. Kathy spoke to Mark. I heard her say, "We love you too, Mark." And I coming out of my room, she said, "Come talk to Mark. He has been hijacked." And I got on the phone. I heard Mark's voice. He said, "Mom, this is Mark Bingham." He was so flustered, I guess, giving me his last name. And he said, "I just wanted to let you know that I love you." He was repeating that, the same thing he had told Kathy a moment before. I told him, "We love you, Mark." And he said, "I'm on a flight 93, United Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco. And there are 3 guys that have taken over the flight, and they say they have a bomb. And I'm calling you from the airphone on the plane," meaning not his cell phone, I guess. I found out since that he was sitting in the last part of first class and that the flight was fairly light, not very many passengers, 45 people aboard. So he may well be able to take a proactive part in stopping, and they intended to do is target. I certainly hope so, anyway.
Ms. Hoagland, I hate interviews like this at this moment, and I'm sure you are suffering in ways that we cannot imagine. Did your son say anything else to you about the circumstances on board the flight?
No, I wasn't able to be. He was cut off. Can you hear me all right?
I can indeed.
The plane, the phone went dead after a few seconds. I got the impression that he was being distracted badly by something going on around him. I didn't hear anything except the sort of confusion. I didn't hear any explosions, any yelling, just voices, and then he seemed quite distracted about something, quite calm voice, though. Was a very close fellow, and then he repeated that he loved us. He emphasized to me that what he was telling me was true. I told him I believed him, that we loved him, and the phone went dead. But I have been asked since. We immediately called the FBI, and they made any reference to any other weapons being used. They had to tell them no. They made mention of knives. We had a moment to speak. I think the reporter from San Francisco that
Mrs. Hoagland, how old was your son, and what did he do?
He's 31 years old. He's president of the Bingham Group, a public relations firm in San Francisco with an office in New York.
And have you talked to anybody in the government this evening? Has anybody in the airline or the government been in touch with you?
Well, United Airlines has called me to confirm that Mark was on the flight. The FBI has been in touch with me and has come out. 2 of the representatives came out this morning in response to our call to them.
Well, Ms. Hoagland, thank you. Thank you for sharing this with us and with the nation. This is a day for you that we won't even begin to imagine, but I think we're...
I'm glad to be able to share what I have been able to find out.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's Alice Hoagland on the phone from California, we're told. We're told it's Alice Hoagland on the phone from California, the mother of Mark Bingham, one of the passengers on United Airlines Flight 93, Ms. Hogan says she's been in touch with United Airlines since. It all seems to fit with early reporting that we had heard today about some of the passengers on United 93 managing to talk. She says the airphone, not his cell phone. Forget that many airplanes have airphones now. And there was chaos on the airplane. He was distracted. The phone went dead. And we know that 38 passengers and 7 crew died in this crash in Pennsylvania on an airplane that had, at least according to 1 or 2 sources we've spoken today in the Federal Aviation Administration environment, had asked to change its flight plan for Washington before it crashed for reasons we do not understand at this point in Pennsylvania. This has been a day, whether it's on the phone at great distance or closer up at the scene of a disaster, when people have been searching for news and connection and friends and relatives. John Quinones has one such example.
These are children who go to school right across from the Twin Towers. They were evacuated during the chaos. The faces of innocence, worried and frightened.
What did you hear?
I heard a big boom,
What happened then?
and it sort of shakes. Some kids were crying because their mom and dad were upstairs.
Among the people inside the burning towers, this little girl's father.
I was scared that my dad was still in there.
You still don't know.
Her name is Jane Schoenholt, her mother Brenda, and sister Remy.
Well, my husband works in the World Trade Center, so it was more him.
Right across the street.
And she was in the school right down there.
What went through your mind?
Very much.
A lot of people I know are dying.
I want my dad, I want my animals.
Her dad, Steve Schoenholt, runs a restaurant on the concourse level of the Twin Towers. He spoke to his family by phone this morning after the first explosion.
Why didn't he evacuate?
Because he thinks he's too tough for those terrorists.
But they haven't heard from their father since.
So let's go find him. Come on.
We follow them for blocks and blocks throughout the disaster zone.
I'm just used to walking over here and to seeing, the Twin Towers. It's scary to see just smoke. And that's it. I mean, that's my home, and it's gone.
Just a few blocks from their home,
Everyone back on the sidewalk, please.
were stopped by police.
Fortunately, right now, until we know that it's safe, we're asking everyone to move back.
Now, the people that were evacuated from the World Trade Center, where would they be right now?
Unfortunately, they are all over.
Officer, they're looking for their father who was in the building.
I understand. Unfortunately, my wife is in the building, and I still haven't heard from my wife. So,
On a cell phone, they call to see if Steve has turned up at one of his other restaurants.
Hi, is Steve there? Steve. Yeah, okay.
Does that mean he's gone or...
No, she just hasn't heard from him.
They continue their desperate search, past the rubble, past the screaming rescue vehicles, and then more barricades.
Okay, this is a secure location.
You can't go in.
Step aside and I'll the yellow light.
A secure location?
How do you feel right now?
I'm scared that my dad, we might not find him. I feel like he's alive. I just want to find him to make sure.
They run into one of their neighbors, who points them toward a police command center several blocks away.
And tell them your situation and that they will escort you to your house.
Yes,
Right there at Pier 40.
Dan, thank you.
It's another long walk, and at the end, it once again seems fruitless.
And do you know anything about when we'll be able to get in there?
I have no idea. There's nothing here.
But then, as Brenda is in the middle of another desperate phone call trying to find her
Good
husband,
to do that. We'll be within.
one little happy ending on a day with so much anguish and so much heart. In search of Steve.
happy ending where there have been so few today, and God, I didn't know where that was going for a moment there. And when they encountered the policeman, and they were looking for their father, and he said his wife was in the World Trade Center too. That was very difficult. Mayor Giuliani reports, Mayor of New York City, that some survivors have been pulled from the rubble tonight. And that is a huge relief that some survivors have been pulled from the rubble tonight, a huge relief to all of us, and a relief, too, I'm sure, to Frank Donahue from the American Red Cross, who's a member of the National Disaster Response Team for the Red Cross and came in today from Philadelphia. And you've had experience in earthquakes before, and I thought as you sat down, you suggested there's some similarity here.
Absolutely. Coming into New York today from Philadelphia, the Holland Tunnel, that eerie kind of sound and feeling when I arrived in New York City of literally hundreds and hundreds of firefighters and police standing by, and the smoke that was all over Lower Manhattan reminded me so much of the smoke I saw over Izmit, Turkey 2 years ago when 19,000 people died in that earthquake. And there are many similarities. Tonight I was down there and they were getting phone calls, cell phone calls from the rubble. And it is that kind of experience in an earthquake. And Red Cross is there to provide backup support for the medical staff that are on scene and the disaster workers that are pulling people from the rubble and the medical staff, but to provide relief to them, also to provide mental health support for family members like we just heard from that woman who presumably lost her son. We have Red Cross disaster workers at every airport, at LAX, at Boston's Logan, at Newark, in responding to family members that were waiting for loved ones on those flights today. And of course, Mr. Jennings, you know, the blood supply. We've
talked about it numerous times today. It's very hard to understand. Are you still looking for volunteers across the country?
Absolutely. You know, and I think it's a great reminder to all of us that our country should never be short of blood. We have about 50,000 units of blood right now ready to respond in New York City, but people throughout the country can give blood by calling 1-800-GIVE-LIFE.
Okay, just do that very slowly. 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. Right. You might try to figure that out numerically for some people who want to figure it out numerically, but it was a little difficult today to figure out whether there was an immediate blood shortage here, even though we know there's blood shortage in the nation as a whole.
Well, as you indicated, you know, as they're pulling people from the rubble over the next couple days, which will continue, that's when the blood will be needed. And again, it's a reminder to all of us that we always need to be ready.
What else does the National Response Team from the Red Cross do? When you say you come in to assist people, what is that?
Today we had disaster vehicles in the neighborhood responding. For example, a gentleman came up to me, had been evacuated from his house and needed his heart medication. So we would make sure we connect him up with hospitals and facility to get him that medication. People will be calling their local Red Cross throughout the United States, trying to find loved ones that were in that building on those airlines. And our local Red Cross here in Greater New York will begin to identify who goes to 13 shelters tonight that the Red Cross is running in Lower Manhattan.
As you were wandered around Lower Manhattan today, how much pressure are the hospitals really under? Hard to get a grasp of that, too.
Again, I believe that, you know, there's the number of people that have actually been pulled, the survivors, are not as many as we'd hope, and so the hospitals...
Not as many yet as we
Correct.
Hope, right.
So the hospitals are not as full as one might think. The number of casualties that have been, you know, taken to hospitals is less than thought at this point, but that's, as you said, the next couple of days we'll see more.
And we don't compare the... I mean, this is comparable to an earthquake in some ways, and we had these two huge buildings that collapsed. This is an act of terrorism, as you well know. But how similar is it in terms of your hopefulness, having seen what you've seen today, that a rescue operation will at least have some measure of success?
Absolutely. I mean, I think all of us have hope that as many people as we could possibly get from the rubble will be saved. I mean, I've seen in earthquakes people buried a number of days that have come out alive, as you have as well, and that's the hope for all of us. And Red Cross and emergency workers tonight, we're feeding 10,000 folks in Lower Manhattan, disaster workers, and that's their primary job, is to try to help find people over the coming days. So Red Cross will be there with them.
Among the horrifying spectacles today, of course, for all of us, is as people fled in panic from the scene of these disasters, the police and the firemen were on their way in to try to help people going under the way, and those two departments in New York City have suffered grievously.
Absolutely. The loss in the fire and police is significant. It is always the case, I think, when there's a disaster. There's so many people running away, and yet there are people like Red Cross volunteers and fire and police
What's the mood on
that
the
are
street
moving
like?
in. Again, it's a sense of quietness. I think people are stunned. I don't think anyone ever could believe that that could happen right here in New York City, and I think people are just stunned. But also New Yorkers have been incredible. As I was driving up here tonight, people knocking on my window of the Red Cross vehicle saying, I want to be a volunteer, I want to give blood, I want to help. Students from NYU coming up to me begging where they could go and help tonight. So people are responding. People wrapping police fire bands around, there's bands with yellow bands around their arms, helping direct traffic. Just like I saw in Turkey and Izmit. I mean, people respond when people need help.
Well, I very much appreciate you coming and taking the time to talk to us. Frank Donahue from the National Disaster Response Team of the Red Cross, and he has said something important. There it is on your screen here, that no matter where you are in the country is in need of blood, and in these immediate emergencies outside Washington and in New York, there will be an intense need for blood in the next couple of days. So you can call 1-800-GIVE-LIFE, excuse me, which translates numerically into 1-800-448-3543. Thanks, Mr. Donahue, very much for coming in. Frank Donahue came up from Philadelphia and just telling us what we've heard so many times today, that the mood on the street is utterly mixed, and yet everywhere you go there are people who wish to volunteer. It's interesting, he said, characteristic of the same thing he found at Izmit in Turkey, where they had those terrible earthquakes within a year ago. And it happens everywhere. The earthquake in Mexico City, remember, same kind of thing. People just spring into action and do what it is that they can do. There are people in the country who may have tried to take advantage of it. I have a note here somewhere about the state of gasoline supplies in the country. A lot of people in the country are anxious that somehow these attacks on the states would lead to a shortage of gas supplies, have rushed to fill up. Don't mean to suggest hoard, but have certainly rushed to fill up, and there were certain people in some parts of the country who may or may not have taken advantage of this. But certainly Exxon Mobil and BP are two of the large companies which have done what they could tonight in various regions of the country to let people know that there was going to be no shortage of gasoline, no interruption of the oil supply as a result of the attacks today, and urged everybody to keep the price just where it was and not take advantage of your fellow citizens. Now, the economic ramifications of this are immediate, and they are international. And Betsy Stark is still with us after these many hours to give us a summary of the impact that this has had in terms of the globalization in which we now live.
Peter, you're right that this is kind of a cautionary tale on the kind of havoc that can be wreaked on the economy. Not surprisingly, oil prices in the futures market did shoot up today on fears that there could be supply disruptions if there's an escalation of tensions, and particularly if those tensions involve the Middle East, which is a source of so much oil production. And evidence tonight that some gas stations are taking advantage of that fear. In Oklahoma, Mississippi, Missouri, and Michigan, a doubling and tripling of gasoline prices to as much as $5 a gallon. And as you say, consumers fearful that there will be shortages waiting online to fill up. But important to tell you, the American Petroleum Institute says there are no shortages of supply. Refinery production is going strong, and the only place we may expect some supply disruptions are New York City, as you can understand.
Now, on the international financial markets day, the New York Exchange was closed, the American Stock Exchange was closed, and is going to stay closed tomorrow. Can you get some sense of the international ramifications as how people interpret the United States and the American economy in the wake of this?
Peter, as you know, psychology is such a strong element in the way the world looks at the health of markets. And what we had today was a blow not only physically to the heart of the financial district, but also in striking the Twin Towers, the center of finance and commerce in New York City and around the world. A blow to investor confidence in the United States as in its ability to kind of continue to be the economic engine that holds the economy together at a time when not only is the U.S. economy on the verge of recession, but economies around the world are. So there's great anxiety in world markets. Our markets, as you say, will be closed tomorrow, and we won't have an announcement until tomorrow on when they will open up. But with
the Japanese markets, I mean, it's now 9 o'clock in the west, a little after midnight in the east, so the Japanese, market is open today. There's a market open somewhere, everywhere in the world. What do you see?
Well, what you see is you see investors around the world, their confidence shaken. The Japanese market opened, as you say, a couple hours ago and has gone down about 5-6%. So, you know, that's a bad day, but it's, you know, it's not a crash. I mean, you know, the global financial system has not fallen apart, Peter, but it has been shaken.
Why are the American and New York Stock Exchanges going to stay closed tomorrow? It's interesting how the political establishment, the Congress, has made a very public point of being open and doing business tomorrow. Why not the exchanges here?
Well, some of it has to do with the fact that the New York Stock Exchange is located just a few blocks from where the World Trade Center Twin Towers once stood. So it's going to be difficult in terms of transportation, in terms of safety, in terms of not interfering with the rescue operations and the cleanup of that area to actually get employees down into those down into the stock exchange. And the major financial firms, which operated out of the Twin Towers, out of the World Financial Center across the street from the Twin Towers, have also got some cleaning up to do and some damage assessment to do before they can be back to full operation.
Betsy, just join me in taking a look at your television monitor there. And here is a list of some of the companies which did business in the World Trade Center. Look at Morgan Stanley. Morgan Stanley had 50 floors in Tower Number 1, 12.5% of the tower owned by Morgan Stanley. Now, we do not know that all of that was devoted to Morgan Stanley investment business. They may have sublet it in some cases to other, because Deutsche Bank, Bank of America, Oppenheimer funds, all who are deeply involved in the international financial community had offices in there. And 9% of the tower, in Tower 1, of course, is the Port Authority, responsible for the bridges and the tunnels around New York. And they are all those offices, and many of their employees today lost. Anything else to add, Betsy, before we give you a break?
Well, you know, I would point out, you know, there's been some talk today that that this could be the straw that breaks the camel's back, that that in the aftermath of this attack, with markets closed, planes not flying, businesses closed, consumers fearful, maybe glued to their sets, that, you know, we could see a drag on the economy that pushes us into recession. But, you know, we may also see surprising resilience in the market. So I think we don't want to be premature in saying that that only bad things will come out of this in terms of the U.S. economy.
Okay, I much appreciate it, Betsy, because I think one of the things we've experienced today that is much bad as there is today, there is a sense of spirit in the country. You see it reflected to some extent in the various newspaper editorials which are beginning to reach us around the country. And while a great many of them from the East Coast to the West Coast, in the South, in the Midwest, in the Mountain States, are pretty unanimous in saying, as the Arizona Republic did, for example, make no mistake, this is war, and they're almost universal in believing that the United States should attack vigorously anyone whom we can hold, country can hold responsible for people this. And while some, like the Miami Herald and others, do make it clear that what we've imposed are special weaknesses in the United States, they all reaffirm, as we've seen for many days, the strength of the nation as a whole, and the resilient, tried and tested as much as the nation has been today. For the second time today, we have a chance to talk to the former CIA Director, James Woolsey. Mr. Woolsey's in the Washington Bureau now. I think you were at home when I first talked to you this morning, sir. Nice to see you again. Just since we have talked to you today, I assume you've spent a lot of time on the telephone. So what have you learned, and what conclusions, if any, are you coming to this evening?
Well, we touched on this earlier, Peter, but I think that there has already been some rethinking in the United States about the World Trade Center attack in 1993 and the possibility that there may have been Iraqi government involvement in that. There's been an interesting book written by Laurie Milroy on this subject. There's a number of government officials who are interested in it. The Clinton administration seemed to think that the World Trade Center and all of the other terrorist operations were either loose associations of people who came together sort of spontaneously, maybe encouraged by a sermon in a mosque or something to conduct a terrorist operation, or in the later years of the Clinton administration, it was Osama bin Laden. Very little attention was paid to the possibility that state sponsorship of terror might be alive and well, especially state sponsorship by Iraq. A lot of the rethinking of the World Trade Center bombing of '93 has to do with the identity of Ramzi Youssef, who is in prison out in Colorado. Youssef was possibly, not proven, but possibly involved with Iraqi intelligence. If that rethinking of '93 is accurate, then one very interesting thing about what happened today is that this operation is sort of a combination of Ramzi Youssef's two prior terrorist operations. One against the World Trade Center in '93 with the truck bomb. The other, the attempt to blow up a number of American airliners in the Pacific.
You're talking in terms of modus operandi.
Yes. Now, Ramzi Youssef is not sitting out there in solitary confinement in Colorado masterminding all this. If there's an M.O., and this is only suggestive, it's not probative, it does suggest that some of the same type of thinking may have been behind what was going on in '93, '94, '95, and what went on yesterday.
Are you suggesting, Mr. Woolsey, that what we've seen today in terms of these attacks in New York and outside Washington today, an operation that may have been in somebody's mind for a considerable lengthy period, quite a lengthy period of time?
Possible. It's quite possible that Osama bin Laden was involved in this, and indeed his group did it. But it is also possible that there was someone behind them. And one candidate is the Iraqi government. Outside chance that it was another terrorist group, and the Iranian government was involved. I think that's much less likely.
And there's also the possibility at the moment, and forgive me, I mean this in the best, most respectful sense, that you and a whole lot of the rest of us don't really know a darn thing at the moment.
I confess, I have no inside information on this whatsoever. I've been a private citizen for 6.5 years. This is all just reading the press and surmise.
One of the things that caught our attention very much today, in fact, I had an inadvertent set to with Senator Hatch of Utah, who's on the Judiciary Committee, and Barbara Walters talked to Senator John Edwards of North Carolina today. They both gave, can I see Mr. Woolsey, please? Thank you. They both gave the strong impression today that they had talked to officials in the CIA today who said, in the words of Mr. Edwards, Senator Edwards, there'd been real progress made in the very first hours after this thing had occurred. And I express disbelief. What do you...
Well, it's possible that they picked up some intelligence either just before or just after the events that led them to suspect someone or some group, quite possibly Osama bin Laden. But that doesn't necessarily mean he was in it alone.
How good do you think Osama bin Laden is, and how much tendency has there been in the United States government to zero in, to focus in on him, as somebody observed to me earlier today, because we need the face of an enemy?
Well, he's worth several $100 million, and that goes a long way in countries where he's been based in the past, such as Sudan, and has been recently, such as Afghanistan. He has a number of followers. He is dedicated, and he has people who work for him who hate the United States deeply. So there is at least I think, a reasonable chance that on certainly the East African bombings and perhaps some of these other terrorist operations, he has been directly and immediately involved, including the Cole. But it doesn't mean that there's no one behind him working with him or guiding him or suggesting approaches or helping with false identities and travel documents and all the rest. And the prime candidate there would have to be, not proven, but would have to be Iraq, I believe.
Do you sense, or do you have any knowledge that the bin Laden has been anywhere else but Afghanistan? It is conventionally believed that he is protected by the Taliban government, which has led people like the former Assistant Secretary of State Larry Eagleburger to suggest tonight that the Taliban should be attacked directly by the United States if they're found to be complicit in this.
The Taliban has certainly been harboring him, but they may have been his hotel, not, to mix a metaphor, not the Wizard of Oz behind the scene pulling the levers. That role would far more be likely to be in the hands of Iraq than this very chaotic conservative government of Afghanistan.
I don't expect a former director of the CIA to be particularly critical of the CIA today. But I think we believe that nobody in the United States government or its intelligence agencies knew this was going to happen today or had any kind of an inkling that we have heard a whisper about today. Do you think the CIA and the other intelligence agencies in the country are as good as they need to be?
No, they're not as good as they need to be. I think they're the best in the world, but they're not as good as they need to be, because in this business, you have to be perfect. It's like playing goalie on a hockey team with any goal scored against you being absolutely deadly. You have to stop everything. And the CIA and the rest of the intelligence community and the FBI did a good job back around the time of Y2K in stopping several terrorist incidents, and they've stopped a number of others that have not been publicized. But you have to stop them all, and you need enough good intelligence to be able to either stop them or help other people, law enforcement or the military, stop them, and this one was a terrible, terrible tragedy.
Now, Mr. Woolsey, we're grateful for the time that you have given us today and the knowledge that you bring to this subject. Thank you very much. I hope you won't go too far away, or at least we'll know where to find you.
Good to be with you.
In the hours and the days ahead. I want to now bring in our principal military analyst for many years, Tony Cordesman, who's in our Washington Bureau, and has devoted an enormous amount of time over the years to writing, studying, and publishing about military and terrorism in the Middle East, from Afghanistan all down through the Persian Gulf. Tony, you there?
Yes, I am, Peter.
What are your observations on these discussions we have been having about terrorism and who might be responsible today?
I think the problem is we all know who the usual suspect is. That's Osama bin Laden. We also know that there are three nations that have strong hostile elements: Iraq, Syria, and Iran. And all of these countries could have played some role. What we don't have is any evidence as yet that we know exactly the role that either Osama bin Laden personally played or that any government played, whether it is the Afghan government or the other three governments I've mentioned. More than that, people have talked, I think, rather carelessly about attacking leaders. But how do you find a leader? How do we find Osama bin Laden? If we attack Afghanistan, do we attack a city, a power plant? Because we can't find the theocrats that rule it. They don't live in government buildings, and blowing them up doesn't really get to the leadership. So I think that we've heard a natural reaction, almost overreaction. But what we haven't heard is how we are going to this time attack the leaders responsible when we didn't do this in the case of Beirut or Al-Kober, or for that matter, Pan Am 103.
But Tony, it's clear, I think, to everybody that the bar has been raised higher than it's ever before. This is attack on the U.S. mainland. This has been described in virtually every editorial in the country today. We heard from every politician this is an act of war. And so why should the bar not be raised higher? Why should the country not be thinking of attacking the leaders if they're in any way complicit in these attacks today?
Well, I think we should consider attacking the leaders. That's not the issue. We have to make sure that they are, A, guilty, and B, we can actually target them, and we have the means to kill them. And in doing so, we don't simply attack civilians or people who are not guilty. And that is really the problem. And it's one thing to talk about a nation like Afghanistan, which is remarkably unpopular and whose leadership have virtually no supporters. And it is quite another to talk about effectively launching another Gulf War against Iraq, a massive war against Iran, or being caught up in any effort that might involve Syria in the middle of a second intifada when we already faced the backlash from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Points well taken, Tony. Let me just try to separate a couple of things out before we let you go on this. You're talking on one hand about an issue of morality and how the United States as a democratic nation will behave, and you're at the same time, it seems to me, talking about tactical operations. Let's just talk tactics for a second. If the President of the United States, are you still there? Decided,
yes,
thank you, can't see you. If the President of the United States decided he was going to launch an attack on, quote, the leadership, unquote, of the Taliban, what would be the chances of success? What effect would it have?
Well, if he announces it, there's a very good chance they'd simply disperse.
No, I'm
and
sorry.
We find it almost impossible to find them.
I'm sorry, I take that back. If the President launched an attack, not announced it in public first, of course.
We probably have to use aircraft. Cruise missiles aren't really precise or reliable enough. We'd have to put in a major air task force so we could find the target and make sure we could protect the aircraft. To do that, we would have to have some kind of really good real-time intelligence on the ground, because we are talking about leaders that move, and we would have to be sure that in the process we didn't create a political backlash. It's not simply an issue of morality by killing people who are innocent.
Tony,
which means we have to monitor the attack as it occurs.
Tony, the loss within the last several days of one of Afghanistan's leading anti-Taliban militia leaders, is this an enormous loss for the United States in terms of intelligence inside Afghanistan? He was assassinated and we believe has died, according to the reports out of Afghanistan.
Well, it could be, but we don't know as yet whether there is some other leader, and we don't know whether this movement will survive or actually react to this suicide bombing by being stronger. And we just don't know yet, Peter.
Okay, and last question for now. The Russians, shows you show we have half our mind in the Cold War today. The Russians have offered cooperation with their intelligence services in Afghanistan, according to congressional sources tonight, talking to Linda Douglas. Is that a realistic suggestion? Can the United States and Russia cooperate in a meaningful way on terrorism?
I think in some ways we already have been, and oddly enough, we've even talked to the Iranians about terrorism in Afghanistan. There'll be real questions about how good the FIS in Russia really is, but certainly they're going to be very careful. Any information they give us, they're going to have been checking out. They're not going to be embarrassed if they can possibly avoid it.
Thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate it. Tony Kordersman, who's been our longtime military analyst, and I said spends an enormous amount of time producing enormous amount of material for us to absorb on this extraordinarily complicated issue. We're also joined briefly by ABC's Judith Kipper, who is in our Washington bureau as well, and I don't doubt, knowing Judith Kipper, who's worked for us for many years now, that she has been on the phone to every person she knows east of the Mediterranean tonight. What have you learned, Judith?
Well, Peter, it's very interesting. I got a number of emails from friends in the region and journalists and others saying, is the United States now going to take a different tack in the Arab-Israeli conflict? And I was quite surprised by that the first impression was that somehow this would teach us a lesson and that we would be more responsive and more active in trying to resolve the Arab-Israeli conflict. I think we're really at a crossroads in terms of the Middle Eastern region, if this turns out to be Middle Eastern perpetrators, because it's really going to be a question now of those who really are with us and those who are not, those who can really condemn this, take actions to cooperate, and to move toward eliminating actions against civilians as something that is quasi-acceptable in the region. And it's going to be very hard for a lot of our allies in the Arab world.
And as you listen to as you take the temperature, if you will, of the Middle East today, we've heard people in many of the Middle Eastern nations deeply depressed by this attack. We've heard other people applauded in public. What temperature do you think the thing is running at?
I think people are confused, fearful of a of retaliation, knowing that more instability and scary things are in front of them. And, you know, the one country that hasn't been mentioned very much is Pakistan, and the U.S. is going to have to reevaluate that relationship if it turns out that this is an Osama bin Laden operation.
Okay, thanks, Judith, very much. Appreciate you coming in as well. You can just feel, I show some sense, as I do, in our coverage that we're, thanks, Judith, very much. Judith Kipper, who's been in our Washington Bureau. We're going back and forth on this story. We have this enormous human tragedy, in one case which we try to cover, and then this enormous challenge to the United States government. The United States is a nation, but the United States government, and what the United States is going to do about it. What does it know at this point, which appears to be very little. But this tendency, fueled somewhat by the analysts who study the history of international terrorism and by a couple of observations by Senators Graham of North Carolina tonight, and Senator Edwards of North Carolina and Senator Hatch of Utah today, that the CIA at this point has picked up in its monitoring of telephone conversations post the attack some contact between supporters of Osama bin Laden. And it makes sense in most everybody's mind that on an occasion like this, Osama bin Laden is one of the prime suspects, just based on the history of the whole thing. And it's also probably very important for us to remember, as Judith Kipper points out, that the United States in the region and in the Muslim world generally is seen very much as a staunch and unswerving and sometimes indiscriminating ally of Israel. So there are Palestinians and people in the Arab world tonight who believe that if they punish the United States, they're punishing Israel. If they punish the Israelis in their conflict with the Palestinians at the moment, it's also important to punish the United States. But let us come back now to the immediacy of the tragedy. WCVB, ABC's station in Boston, reports tonight that one car has been taken away from Logan Airport in Boston, which there is some, they want to know whether or not this was a vehicle that was used by one of the people who hijacked an American Airlines or United Airlines plane out of Boston today. Let me just read quickly what it says. We are able to report that it was a Mitsubishi Mirage. It had Virginia plates. We haven't got the license plate number yet. FBI Forensics has the car at an off-site garage. It was actually towed by the state police. Included in the 6 bags of evidence confiscated by the FBI were chairs that the suspected terrorists may have sat in at the airline terminal, and the FBI hopes to pull DNA off the seats in the airport. And there again you see an advance in science in terms of investigating innocence and criminality. We see it in the prison system in the country as a whole, and we see the FBI bringing to bear very quickly the notion that DNA may be a clue here. But as we know, these terrorists got on 2 of these planes in Boston, which were intended to make transcontinental flights, and hijacked both of them and headed for New York City. And Logan Airport officials now confirm that reporting from ABC's affiliate in Boston, WCVB. And then the officials at Logan Airport, probably reflecting what's going to happen at a lot of airports around the country now tonight. The director of aviation there, Tom Kenton, said he expects that what we're going to get at Logan Airport and certainly others around the country is very quickly instituted a measure of security at the airport similar to that which was in place during the Gulf War. Much greatly reduced access to the side of the airport and much greatly reduced access for people to the passenger areas unless they're flying, and there'll be identification checks. In other words, all of the things that the country had to become accustomed to through the Gulf War may now be put in place again. And we'll get some sense of that when the Congress meets again tomorrow, because we know they're going to pass legislation which will, in the first instance, undoubtedly be in support of the president, who gets very high marks from a lot of people today for that speech that he made in the White House tonight. And beyond the support for the president, there will be legislation, we don't doubt for a second, introduced very quickly to increase the number of resources which are available to counterterrorism in the United States, to some urging of a better coordination among federal agencies, and a greater legal authority. It's the dangerous one, perhaps, in the minds of many Americans. More legal authority for federal agencies to impose on people's freedoms in the country in order to conduct this campaign, this investigation against terrorism. And you saw in our poll tonight that many people agreed it was worth giving up some of their freedoms, at least in the short run, according to a very quick snap poll we took, if it aided the investigation. Back to the people themselves. ABC's Lynn Scher, who spent an early part of the day very focused on the aircraft and the passengers, has now, I think, Lynn, put together a piece for us on what we do know about people who have been victims today.
Peter, that's right. You remember what President Bush said a little bit earlier today. He said the victims were in airplanes in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Well, here are some of who they were. Olson, former federal prosecutor, more recently a TV commentator, was on American Flight 11 that left Dulles Airport for Los Angeles. She was also the wife of U.S. Solicitor General Ted Olson. Mrs. Olson called her husband on a cell phone to report that the plane had been hijacked and that at least 2 men had herded the passengers into the rear of the plane. She asked her husband what she should do. Then the plane crashed into the Pentagon. David Angel of Pasadena, California, was one of the creators of Frasier, the TV show. He and his wife Lynn were on American Flight 11 from Boston, the one that crashed into the first World Trade Center tower. There were at least 2 highly placed computer executives among the victims. Daniel Lewin, age 31, was co-founder and chief technical officer of Akamai, an internet infrastructure company based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He leaves a wife and 2 sons. Edmund Glazer, 41, of Chatsworth, California, was an executive at MRV Communications, a leading California fiber optics company. He, too, was on the Boston to Los Angeles flight, and he leaves a wife and son. There were 2 prominent members of the professional ice hockey community. Garnet Ace Bailey, director of pro scouting for the Los Angeles Kings hockey team, once a star player himself, was on United 175 headed from Boston to Los Angeles. Ace Bailey was 53 and is survived by his wife and son. On the same flight was Mark Bavitz, an amateur scout for the LA Kings. We know some of the crew members' names on that flight. Al Marchand was a flight attendant from Alamogordo, New Mexico, a former police lieutenant who went to work for United after retiring from police work. He wanted to be a pilot. The man who was the pilot of that flight was Victor Saraceni of Lower Makefield Township, Pennsylvania. A neighbor described him as a great guy with a wife and 2 children. I'm sure, said the neighbor, he fought to the end. The pilot of American 11, the first plane to hit the World Trade Center, was John Oganowski, 52, of Massachusetts. And there are more, of course, many, many, too many more. The airlines are not releasing complete passenger manifests yet, citing security reasons. We'll be hearing a lot more of those names tomorrow. Peter?
Thanks, Lynn, very much. Giving personality and life, in essence, or personality to the people who were involved in these disasters today. And we'll run that piece again, I think, fairly soon now, because we've been so slow for all the obvious reasons and so unable to attach lives and personalities and families and connections to the people who have suffered and died in these instances. So that's a big step forward. Thanks very much, Lynn. Just 2 remarks quickly about that piece. There was a lot of focus there on Dennis Potvin, who goalkeeper in that game there for Colorado at the moment, and it was not Dennis Potvin, even though you saw a lot of him and his jersey there. It was not Dennis Potvin we were talking about as a victim on one of those aircraft today. And ABC's Pierre Thomas, who covered the FBI and was the first person to raise with us here today the value of the passenger manifests in terms of trying to focus on the perpetrators of this themselves, has proven to be extremely valuable. You hear from Logan Air Base and from Boston tonight that the FBI is all over the airport, all over the car, all over a car that may have been used by the terrorists today in order to give personalities and connections to them as well. So the investigation inches forward. And for the country as a whole, I think some time ago, several hours ago, we ran a fairly lengthy piece which we had put together, which was just simply scenes of today. We take no pleasure in reviewing these scenes for you time and again, except trying to get you closer to the reality of what has actually been happening on the ground. But this has been one of those days when news agencies share information. It's a competitive world, but we have shared information today, giving each other access to material which has helped the country get closer to what has happened. And this is the most recent piece that we get courtesy of CNN, yet one more angle on the attack on the Trade Center today. We have seen that earlier today from a freelance photographer who shot it down below, and now we see it again from another angle today, courtesy of CNN, who shows the power of an aircraft going at speed, absolutely going into one of the two trade towers today. And we thank CNN, and all thank each other for sharing today in a state of national emergency, the information that we have available to each other. Here's a piece we prepared and ran some hours ago, which I hope makes a contribution to the rest of you in the country as to just some of the turmoil that occurred on the ground.
Oh my God! Oh shit! Oh my God! Oh my God! Another.
Let's just get back. Get back. You with me, Don?
What are we in 3 World Financial Center? We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess, because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
Give him here. Give him here. You can walk. You can film it. Okay. Hey, go. Give him here.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
Anything else that you saw? Were you there for the second hit by the plane?
About 10 minutes later, the second building went off.
Did you see it?
Yes, I saw it. It just blew up. A big explosion. People started running. It was just chaos everywhere. People jumping out. People just kept jumping and jumping and jumping. And you could still see they were alive because they were flailing around.
A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way. He's not in a large truck. I know.
Jerry, try and shoot this. Try and shoot this as we run, Jerry. Try and shoot this.
Put your mask on. Put your mask on. Don't put it down. Oh my God, there it goes!
You okay, officer?
Standing next to one World Trade Center, and then all of a sudden I heard rumbling, and we all started running away from it. The glass like blew out and threw me onto the sidewalk, and I couldn't see for like 20 seconds.
We came from the 82nd floor, and I don't know what my tears are. I don't know. I hope to God they're okay. That's all I can say. I don't know what. We saw a shadow. It looked like a plane. Next thing we know, it was boom, and the floor started shaking.
Right behind. It's a war. We've been attacked. It's like World War II.
This is so terrible. Can't even look at it. Because all I can see are people. I don't see a building. I see people. People hurt. Children without mothers and fathers tonight.
Well, I don't mean this to be self-serving in terms of news gatherers, but we have a lot to thank camera teams and our own ABC News camera teams and the freelancers today who've contributed to all of this, who've helped us to understand the magnitude of this. You just run through those pictures again, and you appreciate, first of all, the danger and the immensity of the tragedy. There's the dust everywhere, the dust and the debris everywhere. It could indeed be an earthquake in some rural place, as we've seen in Turkey and Mexico and Armenia and other places, where everything just gets simply buried. It's small compared to what's happened to entire communities in the past, in that it's in a fairly self-contained area it's a very small area in downtown New York City, at the very tip of the island of Manhattan, adjacent to the Hudson River. You see all those papers, which are businesses and lives, going up, and then you hear a woman there just simply saying, all the children tonight who do not have mothers and fathers, and there is the confusion, and there is the panic, and those constant pictures of the firefighters. Mayor Giuliani said not too long ago, confirmed that 3 senior members of the New York Fire Department, and indeed had lost their lives, and we have believed for some hours now that as many or perhaps more than 200 firefighters have lost their lives. And you think of what an enormous event when a single firefighter loses his or her life, mostly his life, in any community in the United States, in most parts of which we have volunteer fire departments. And here we have one of the most professional fire departments in the city, and has lost 200 members of its force, according to virtually every source we've talked to in this instance. And then there is the exhaustion, because the rescue teams and the salvage teams, whatever you want to call them at the moment, have been working now since 8 o'clock this morning Eastern Time, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning here in New York City, 3 hours earlier, as everybody knows, on the West Coast. But everybody's been engaged in this, which was why probably Governor Pataki and others have said that volunteers in the form of doctors and nurses are going to be needed, because as determined as people in the fire department are, for example, to stay on the job, because in many cases it's their comrades they're trying to rescue or look for, just makes it very clear the level of exhaustion which many firefighters must feel at this moment. ABC's Chris Cuomo has spent part of today focused just on the fire department, and here is his report on what it's been like for firefighters today.
An unprecedented terrorist attack. While thousands fled for safety, New York City firefighters were heading straight into the blast.
As soon as this happened, people were calling on the phone, every station in the city, how can I help, how can I help?
But with buildings of this size and fires of this magnitude, on this day, even their best wasn't enough.
We tried our best, and it was just too much. It was unbelievable. For me, it was.
When the towers showed signs of collapsing, they scrambled to escape. Most made it, but some couldn't get out fast enough. Exactly how many, we may not know for days.
Glass.
But what about the others? At this station, calls started pouring in.
Unfortunately, we don't really have much to tell them.
In all the chaos, there would be no quick answers. Just firefighters looking for their lost brothers.
Get our brother. Get our brothers. A couple of brothers are trapped down there.
It's a scene of frustration and fear. Trucks as far as the eye can see, blocked from going back. And a triage center, already seeing too many firefighters.
Have you ever heard of an incident where so many firemen and so many policemen were hurt?
No, and I used to work at EMS many years ago, and no. I mean, firemen were coming in and telling us that there was 3 rescue companies that never made it out.
As of tonight, as many as 200 firefighters are feared to be dead. Many are missing, and still, the rescue effort has barely begun.
Chris Cuomo on what it's like being firefighters today. There's no way we can catch you up on a lot of news, but I want to go back to an earlier point of the day. We have been confused, not to mention concerned, about what happened to United Flight 93. This is the one that crashed in rural Pennsylvania earlier today, with 38 passengers and 7 crew members on the board. And this, we learned subsequently, was an airplane that had asked for a change of flight plan and was seeking a flight plan to go in the direction of Washington. And this raised very quickly the question of what actually happened to this aircraft. And the Pentagon denied very early on
WDHN,
that
Channel
this
18,
aircraft
Dothan.
was in fact shot down by the U.S. military as the only way to prevent it from flying in the direction of Washington. Our investigative team has worked very, very hard on this all day today, and I must tell you at this moment that this is still an open question, very much an open question, as to what happened to United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed for no reason that we are able to grasp definitively in rural Pennsylvania. But we do know that the Pentagon denied earlier today that to John McWethy, who was at the Pentagon, our Pentagon correspondent for much of the day, that the U.S. military was involved in any way in an attack on this aircraft. It is still, I have to tell you, an open question. And there is, of course, the question, paramount in the investigation at the moment, about the passengers on the 2 aircraft which were hijacked by terrorists out of Boston, and whether or not some of the passengers on that board are associates of Osama bin Laden. And we have not been able to confirm that yet, but it is certainly a direction in which this investigation is going at the moment. And there is a possibility, all in the realm of yet to be firmed up. There is a possibility that some of these individuals on these aircraft were on what are called watch lists to be arrested if they, or whenever they tried to enter the United States. An open question at the moment, but we've had tremendous help today from our investigative team in terms of trying to pin these things actually down. I simply leave you with 2 open questions at the moment: the fate of United Airlines Flight 93 and the identity and affiliation of at least 4 of the passengers on board the 2 aircrafts which were hijacked out of Boston earlier today. And here's the kind of thing we hate to hear and we hate to report. And any number of officials today have spoken about that. And that is people in the country giving vent to prejudice to members of the Muslim community in the United States. ABC's Deborah Amos reports, who's been stranded in Miami tonight, because everybody in the United States is stranded if they're trying to go anywhere else, reports that there have already been threats there to the Islamic Center in Miami. There are major Islamic centers in many major American cities now, a growing Muslim population in the United States, and there have been threats to the Islamic Center. 7,500 Muslims live in South Florida, and we can only echo in the loudest possible, most obvious terms today that anybody in the United States who gives vent to their prejudice against their fellow citizens tonight, whomever they may be, is, well, fairly evident in what the public officials, including Mayor Giuliani and Governor Pataki here in New York, have said today, and which everybody in Washington will surely express at the moment. You do not blame communities for the acts of individuals, period. Mayor Giuliani has confirmed for us that senior members of the fire department were killed. John McWethy reports from outside the Pentagon tonight, when he was on duty there, that a member of the Arlington Fire Department believed that maybe 800 people would have died in the attack on the Pentagon, and we have not been able to grasp the dimension in terms of numbers of the people who have died in the attack on the trade towers. But I remind you of what Mayor Giuliani said earlier today, which is a qualitative, not a quantitative answer. When we find out the numbers, it will be more than we can bear. And any loss of life is more than the country wants to bear at the moment, but there's a hint there, I think, from Mayor Giuliani that the number of casualties among the 50,000 people who work at the trade tower on a daily basis, trade towers on a daily basis, may be high. But we do not know how high. And as we try to grasp what the rest of the nation is feeling, whether it's in Los Angeles or Seattle, we rely on our reporters to give us what they can get. You can't get in the hearts and minds of everybody on an occasion like this, but Brian Rooney has a report for us first from Los Angeles International Airport, which may contain some of that. Here's his report from Los Angeles.
Here at one of the busiest airports in the world, the planes are all grounded. For a while, some passengers attempted to rebook flights, then all of them were ordered to leave. The terminals are empty.
We're evacuating all terminals and we're stopping traffic all over.
Los Angeles International was the destination for 3 of the 4 airliners that crashed today. But there has been no official word here about who was on board. By mid-morning, several relatives or friends of passengers on those planes arrived at the airport.
Take these 2 family members up to 42A.
They were quickly led away by airline employees. Security is at its highest, even while the airport is completely closed. The terminals are flooded with police and FBI officers looking for the slightest thing out of order. About noon, someone discovered something suspicious, and the bomb squad was called in. Reporters were herded away, and it turned out to be a false alarm. The airport is sealed off. The only sounds are the recorded passenger announcements, which continue to run over the loudspeakers, and the echo of police dogs barking in the empty walkways. Brian Rooney, ABC News, Los Angeles.
A similar report, or similar report in that we're seeking what's happening in the various other communities around the country which are affected in many ways, partly because everybody in the country has got some connection emotionally or directly to the people involved in this tragedy today, comes to us from Neil Karlinski, our reporter who's based in Seattle.
Far from the violence, in Seattle, a Navy frigate armed with anti-aircraft weapons steamed into position near downtown in Elliott Bay. Throughout this city, life as normal simply stopped.
They came on and said that they were evacuating and please leave immediately.
Downtown, several buildings were evacuated. Even the city's famous Space Needle was closed indefinitely for fear it too could be a target. Children were kept in school, but the day was anything but normal, as the smallest of students tried to understand what was happening. On the water, ferry service, on alert for car bombs, stopped service to all but individual passengers.
I asked the American people to join me.
Many of those who saw the images before leaving work, like this woman, stayed home, disgusted by the pictures before them.
I just woke up to it. I mean, it's unbelievable. I can't believe it. I have so many friends in New York, and it's just...
It's going to be a couple of minutes. We'll be over to help you. Okay?
Others, desperate to help any way possible, simply flooded blood banks.
I had to do something.
You just feel so helpless, and this is about all you can do, is come and donate blood.
On the streets, churches opened their doors for people to do the only other thing many could immediately think of, pray. This man came in off the street.
Pearl Harbor pales in what's happened today.
There will be more prayers, blood donations, and help of all kinds in the days, weeks, and months to come.
As in the rest of the country, no one knows when this city, so far from the tragedy, will again return to normal. Neil Karlinski, ABC News, Seattle.
So far from the tragedy, and yet, of course, so close. And Neil Karlinski puts his finger on something that we've talked about earlier today, again, that all across the country, in every part of the country, people just went into their local churches and said a prayer for the people who have been caught at the center of this maelstrom in the country today. And then you see a picture of the Space Needle in Seattle, which is a reminder to us that from one end of the country to the other, and overseas as well today, installations, government buildings, schools, whatever, theme parks were closed because and malls were closed because they were deemed to be vulnerable in what was certainly a concerted attack on the United States in at least 3 locations, and may have been greater, and we just had no knowledge of this, only the dreadful anticipation that something worse was going to happen, something more was going to happen as the day went by. And so all across the country today, the public has been engaged in a very intimate way, no matter, as Neil Karlinski says, how far they were away from New York City or from the Pentagon outside Washington, or the tragedy which involved United Airlines Flight 93, which crashed in rural Pennsylvania. And as I recall my figures, Lynn Scher, who did a computation for us, believes that more than 260 people died on the aircraft alone, passengers and crew. We talked to the mother, again to our surprise, talked to the mother of one of the passengers, Jeff Bingham, I think, or Brigham, his name was, on board the aircraft that crashed in Pennsylvania, who said that he had called at this moment of astonishing peril to say that he loved the members of his family. And they had said that they loved him, and he called on the air phone on board the plane. Other people had managed to call on cell phone, including the wife of the Solicitor General, who called and told her husband, the Solicitor General, Ted Olson, what was going on board the aircraft as that airplane rushed toward its attack on the Pentagon. So the technological age has enabled people to have this communication in the worst moments of crisis. And the young man, 41 years old, I think he was, 31 years old, on board the United Airlines flight, who was, his mother said, how she managed to talk to us is quite beyond us, was clearly, she thought, distracted at the time when the phone went dead. And we, of course, know what happened to that aircraft. Is Lisa Stark with us in Seattle?
I am here, Peter.
Hey, Lisa, thanks for being with us. You've been with us for a very long day. You've heard much of what we've said today, and you have reported much of what we know about the general state of aviation in the country, these 4 planes and air traffic. Do you mind running through it once more for us before we give you a break, which I think you must need very much?
Running through what we know about the day, Peter?
Let's divide it in two. Let's divide it. Let's start with the aircraft themselves, the 4 aircraft that are involved, American, United Airlines, and then we'll come back, if we may, to those airplanes are all over Canada tonight, and passengers just stranded. And I know you're prepared a piece for us as well.
I will. We'll go to that in a minute. Let me just tell you that overall we believe 266 people were on board the 4 airplanes, passenger and crew members. As you know, 2 American planes, 2 United planes departing from 3 airports on the East Coast, all bound for the West Coast, presumably all carrying full loads of fuel for the long trip across country, which would have made them much more deadly incendiary devices in their own, obviously. And I want to bring you up to date now with the piece we've prepared about what we know about how this horrible day progressed.
The first plane to crash into the Twin Towers was this Boeing 767, American Airlines Flight 11. The plane with 92 passengers and crew left Boston around 8 a.m., heading for Los Angeles. About a half hour into the flight, it made a hard left turn over upstate New York. There were violent changes in airspeed. The plane turned and headed toward Manhattan. It slowed and aimed right for the World Trade Tower. At the same time, this United 767, Flight 175, 65 people on board, also going from Boston to Los Angeles, is flying over Massachusetts. It turns toward New Jersey. The jet then makes a U-turn over the state, comes toward Manhattan from the south over Staten Island. It slams into the second World Trade Tower. Both planes were in the air about 45 minutes. Even before the towers are hit, this American Airlines 757, Flight 77, has left Washington's Dulles Airport bound for Los Angeles. It's believed the plane was in the air for over an hour before it destroyed a section of the Pentagon. This is all that's left of United Airlines Flight 93. It left Newark bound for San Francisco. It appears hijackers took control somewhere over Cleveland. The plane took a hard turn to the south. Then someone in the cockpit radioed that the plane wanted to change flight plans and head to Washington, D.C. It never made it, disappearing from radar, crashing south of Pittsburgh. As the hijackings unfolded, passengers on at least 2 of the jets made cell phone calls, warning of hijackers armed with knives. And a flight attendant on the American Airlines plane that hit one of the Twin Towers called the airline's operations center to report 2 flight attendants had been stabbed. Hijackers had broken into the flight deck. The flight attendant also identified the seat number of one of the hijackers. ABC's aviation analyst believes at the end the hijackers, not the pilots, were flying the planes.
There were pilots on board those airplanes of some sort, people who were sufficiently trained to be able to handle those controls and do what was done here.
Just before 9:30 in the morning, the Federal Aviation Administration took an unprecedented step, ordering a nationwide halt to all air travel. All planes on the ground stayed there. Planes already in the air continued on. They were all on the ground by mid-afternoon. One critical question: how did the hijackers and their weapons get on board the planes? 2 of the jets departed from Boston. The director of the Port Authority there defended the security system.
We have a very high security standard here. We consider ourselves as secure, if not more secure, than any other airport in the United States.
But numerous government reports over the last decade have found significant security lapses at many of the nation's major airports.
U.S. airports have a terrible security problem, and just asking Grandma if she's packed her own bag isn't going to fix that problem. It's more than just the passenger checkpoint. It's the whole perimeter of the airport and all the people that go on and off. And the FAA, no matter what they tell you, has done a terrible job at that.
Aviation experts say it is likely the air transportation system in America will be changed forever by today's tragedies.
Now, of course, what security lapses there were, we do not know at this point. That will be a question that is being asked and will hopefully be answered in the days ahead. Peter, we do know that the Federal Aviation Administration is planning at this time to resume flights again at noon on Wednesday, noon Eastern time on Wednesday. No doubt it will be a gradual buildup. We know already from the Secretary of Transportation, Norm Mineta, that there will be no curbside check-in allowed of baggage. You will see a lot more officers in the airports. People will be stopped at random and asked to show their identification. No doubt there will be additional security measures that we will never see. And as I had reported earlier, there is also some talk about ramping up the Sky Marshal program. That program does exist, but they could expand it and have Sky Marshals fly on additional airplanes. That has also been under discussion in Washington today. So the folks I have talked with say, at least in the short term, don't expect any of the usual ease, really, at which we get into the airports and get on the airplanes. And I think probably passengers would be more relieved than frustrated by that at this point.
Lisa, thank you very much, A, for that report, and B, for your reporting all day. And what happened, we've seen this happen before, there is an instant reaction to disaster, and security gets very much tougher in the short run, and then it just gets lax. In part, do I understand correctly, there's a huge turnover in security staffs at the airport? I saw one quote today, up to 400% a year. It pays less to be a security guard in an airport than it does at the McDonald's.
It is not a very glamorous job, certainly. It is a tough job. It is a tedious and boring job, as you can well imagine, and it does not pay well. Turnover is exceedingly high. At the Boston airport, for example, where two of the planes departed from today, from about 1998 to 1999, their turnover in security screeners was over 200%. At Dulles Airport, the security turnover in screeners over 90%. It's a serious problem. It's one that a number of studies throughout the years have pointed out, and obviously that will be looked at again in the light of what has happened with these four airplanes.
And I was looking at a quote today from Chris Yates, who's the editor of Jane's Aviation Security. Jane's widely recognized as being very good about weapons and security, says in a quote here, tests have revealed repeatedly that staff conducting airport security tests just fail them on a routine basis. Is that your experience as well?
The Department of Transportation Inspector General has run a number of checks. Even the FAA do sort of random checks where they try to slip things through security, and inevitably things do get through. Another thing we should mention, Peter, we had reports today, as you know, that it appeared that there were at least some sort of knives on the plane. We heard that flight attendants were stabbed. We had heard a report from Barbara Olson, who was on the flight that went into the Pentagon, that the hijackers on that plane were armed with box cutters. And we should point out that under FAA guidelines, under the rules, you are allowed to bring a knife on a plane if the blade is 4 inches or smaller. They're making allowances for pocket knives, even things like nail files. Now, the FAA tells us that airlines and state and local authorities can issue tighter regulations, but the federal guideline is that it's all right, that it is allowed to go on a plane with a knife with a 4-inch blade or less. We don't know, of course, what devices actually were on the plane.
It really does stick in my mind. The aviation, the security spokesman at Logan Airport saying he thinks his airport has the best security in the United States, certainly breached today. Let me talk to you now about aircraft which are stranded outside the United States. I gather that from eastern to western Canada tonight, the Canadian airports are littered with operating aircraft, and that Canadian cities, large and small, are crowded with international travelers, and a large number of them Americans trying to get somewhere, who are stranded in Canada tonight.
I believe there were about 120 flights, if my numbers are correct, that ended up touching down in Canada that were bound for the United States. The international flights were the ones that were diverted primarily to Canadian airspace. Those people, as you mentioned, are stranded. No doubt they will be some of the ones that will hopefully be able to get back on those planes and get where they were going tomorrow. I should mention, Peter, that whenever we have any kind of a weather disaster, for example, that slows air travel, thunderstorms, even a big snowstorm, it takes 3, 4, 5 days really for the system to even get back up and running. I mean, we're talking about 36,000 to 40,000 flights every day in the United States. So I would anticipate that it will take perhaps even longer to get the system back up because everything is just shut down and they're starting from ground zero really to try to get operations back up again. And again, security, as you would expect, no doubt will be very, very tight when the system does get back up and running.
And let's talk very briefly about the Air Marshals program. The Air Marshals program, my recollection, is came into being 15, 20 years ago when hijackings began to occur on a pretty regular basis to Cuba. Nobody got hurt. The plane got hijacked to Cuba. Passengers always came home. But the Air Marshal program, I think, was introduced at that time. You said it's still in place. How active is it?
The FAA won't say. We have asked them today repeatedly, well, how often do air marshals get on planes? How often do they really fly on flights? And they say that's a security issue. We can't tell you that. So we don't really know how active it is. The sense is that if they were to bring it back, it would be in a much more active fashion, that these air marshals would be flying on many more additional flights. But again, this is all hush-hush, as you can imagine, for security reasons. So I can't even tell you how active the program is today, just that it is still in existence, and air marshals do fly on flights in the United States at any given time.
Thanks very much, Lisa Stark. You've done a wonderful job for us today under the saddest and worst of circumstances, and we're very grateful to you. I must say this Air Marshal program is very much in existence in the Middle East. I think everybody who pays any attention to air travel knows that El Al, the Israeli airline, is one of the most secure airlines on which to fly. Other airlines of Arab nations at various stages have certainly had armed security on board. I once flew on a Royal Jordanian aircraft from Jordan to Beirut, which is only 50 minutes away. Somebody made a flip observation about hijacking, and within seconds we all had semi-automatic weapons pointed at our heads by security officials who appeared from nowhere. So in various parts of the world, so certainly true on Soviet and subsequently perhaps on Russian airlines, security is present or not present, depending on the mindset of the government in question at the time. But there's always been something of a feeling that the risk to passengers was huge if there was going to be a gunfight on board an aircraft involving terrorists, hijackers, and an otherwise innocent traveling public. So it's been a fairly controversial program almost since the beginning. I want to talk now to our principal aviation analyst, John Nance. We've talked to John several times today. Remind me, John, you're also in Seattle, right? Now, where are you?
That's correct. Tacoma, actually.
You're in Tacoma, in Washington, which I think is your home, as I recall. And I've seen subsequent reporting today which confirms that which you were so eloquent about this morning, or so particular about this morning, that it is not very difficult to fly a 757 or a 767, or at least on the short-term basis to get an aircraft directed where you want it to do, even if you're a rank amateur. Can you go through that again for us?
Yes. I missed the last part of the question.
Well, just how,
Peter, I'm sorry.
I apologize, windy question, but that it is possible, without a great deal of experience, to get a 757 or a 767 to go where you want it to go, even if you're an amateur, if you're going to go a short distance, that these are basically easy and similar aircraft to fly.
Once it's in the air, that's correct. However, when you take a look at the picture of the 767 going into the building there, the World Trade Center, Peter, what you see is an aircraft that's in a bank that's being manipulated rather deftly to get it right on target. And the fact that we had both these airplanes hit on target suggests to me that we had fairly experienced pilots of one sort or another in that terrorist group at the controls of that airplane. But is it possible that they could be more amateurish and just guiding it maybe with the experience only in a single-engine aircraft? Yes, it is within the realm of possibility.
I think I heard one airline captain say today that with 3 or 4 months experience only, you could actually get a license which would qualify you to fly one of these aircraft, or at least, as he said, it's very, very easy to aim the plane.
It is, if you've had some experience on the controls. It does not feel like a small single-engine aircraft, so there is a bit of a difference there. But I think what I would come back to is this, that if somebody were planning to do this, and obviously somebody planned very well, they're not going to want to take a chance that maybe somebody isn't going to, the person at the controls that they put there, their terrorist, is not going to hit the building. They're going to want some training, and that's where I think we can probably follow that string. There's something else that, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about that you brought up a little while ago, and I thought it was very interesting. You're talking about Flight 93 and the question about why it went down there in Pennsylvania and that we don't know the cause, and the fact that, of course, the government says, the military says tonight that they did not shoot it down. There are still two possibilities, and we don't really have a clear track on this. One, the Associated Press reported several hours ago that in one of the cell phone calls from that airplane, from a passenger, the passenger was talking about the circumstances of the hijacking, and at a certain point he said, wait a minute, there's a puff of smoke out on one of the wings, or a puff of white smoke, and then he said, we're going down. Exactly what sequence that's in, I don't know, but apparently that call was made to a 911 center, and I assume that we'll be able to get that later on. Now, if that's true, that's a very great puzzle, Peter, because there is nothing that you can do in the cockpit that's going to create a puff of smoke on the wing, and that raises the possibility of some outside force, i.e. a fighter shooting at it. By the same token, we have this as the only one of the four airplanes that made a sudden turn and requested a change in direction. The other three, according to Lisa, we don't have any information that they made any request of air traffic control. The fourth one did. And that would indicate possibly, it could have been one of the hijackers, but it indicates possibly that one of the pilots was allowed to stay functional long enough to agree to take the plane back to Washington. He would not have had any idea what they were going to do or wherever it was headed. And that at some point in time, that still remaining pilot or pilots got into a fight, and that could have led, very much as in Egypt Air, to a tussle in the cockpit which lost control. So we've got really a dichotomy.
Just to remind people about Egypt Air, there's a long debate about whether Egypt Air crashed as the willful act of a pilot. Was there a struggle on board with the Egyptian pilot trying to force the aircraft down, other people trying to resist? It is possible that in every instance today there was a struggle in the cockpit before someone got their hands on the controls and went directly for their targets.
And I think I'm not only echoing my own feelings, but also that of the NTSB when I say that the Egyptian government, to the contrary notwithstanding, there really is no other scenario whatsoever that fits the Egypt Air disaster of over a year ago, except that the first officer intended to put that airplane into the water, and ultimately, despite the efforts of the captain to stop him, succeeded.
Now, in terms of access to the cockpit today, it is, we all get on airplanes and we go over, and we now know that in this age, the cockpit door is always locked. The stewardess goes up and has a code, knocks 2-3 times, or whatever she does, sometimes has a punch-in security code in order to get the door open. Not difficult to bust through that door, though, if you're determined enough.
No, it isn't difficult, Peter, and the reason that it isn't is because if we made that door too sturdy and we ended up with a rapid decompression, would cause structural problems to the airplane. As a matter of fact, in some of the doors in some of the aircraft, like 737s, there are actually pressure blowout panels on the door that would respond to a pressure change. And those could be, in certain circumstances, removed more easily than we'd like. You can't put a bank vault door up there. Part of the problem is simply the pressure vessel of the aircraft. So a determined individual is going to be able to get through that door. And we've had two instances, as a matter of fact, in the past number of years where big, burly people, both of them deranged in one form or another, broke through just with the force of their own body. I think both of those instances were in 737s.
John, you have worked so many investigations for us over the years, and you have the added advantage that few people do, being a commercial airline pilot, and know what it's like in the cockpit. And in so many instances, we've actually resolved the issue of what has happened. Ultimately, we've learned what we really believe happened. What's your instinct about today? Are we ever going to learn what really happened on board those airplanes?
Peter, I think we will, at least in 2 of the 4 cases. I think the one in Pennsylvania is going to yield the voice recorder and the cockpit, or the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder rather easily, given the confined condition of the crash site. I think because of the Pentagon situation, we will find those recorders as well. there is so much debris on the World Trade Center site. It's going to be very difficult. It's going to be simply fortuitous if those recorders are recovered anytime soon. I think eventually they will be, but probably not soon. And when they are, they're able to withstand a tremendous amount of force and heat and all sorts of disastrous impacts. So I would say that we probably eventually will know precisely what went on in terms of voice in that cockpit in all 4 cases.
I apologize for the interruption. Does this apply to the cockpit voice recorder or just to the black box recorder which records the mechanical goings-on of the aircraft?
Both actually. They're both in the same location. They're powered the same way. They are in 2 separate orange boxes in the tail end of the airplane, and they both have the same degree of survivability.
That was the question I wanted to answer. The cockpit voice recorder does have the same degree of survivability as do the black boxes, which have time and again revealed information about tragedies in the air.
Not only that, Peter, but some of the later models are actually solid state. They don't even have any moving parts, and they can withstand, I believe it's up to 800 G-forces.
Okay. John, anything you want to add at this particular point?
Well, I guess one thing that's probably a little bit out of the area of expertise, but just to echo some of the other things that have been said today, you know, this is an attack on the United States, but it's also an attack on humanity. I feel this very greatly in several different veins, not only as a citizen, but as an Air Force officer, a reservist, and certainly as a member of the airline community, which has been so sorely represented in this fiasco. And I guess one other thing, if you'll permit me, Peter, and that was about the comments that we've made in regard to security. This is something that a lot of us have known about and quite frankly been very upset about for a long time, is that if we're going to have screening in our airports and we're going to make the pretense that this is